Thank you, everyone. Thanks for being here. I really appreciate all the speakers, sponsors, attendees. I hope you all have an incredible next 2 days. I hope there's a ton of community building, deal making, recruiting, business building that happens the next 2 days. I want to share 3 things very quickly. The first is America's biggest startup is America. And every day we're growing, reinventing, improving, and innovating in pursuit of a better tomorrow. This was actually an ad in the Wall Street Journal a few years ago, and this is what I opened up with a few years ago, also at MVS. We've had incredible founders, fascinating founders, George Washington, Alexander Hamilton, Ben Franklin, incredible leaders, flawed in some ways, but exhibited many of the best aspects of what startup founders we look for. So when folks are like, oh, do you look for a Mark Zuckerberg, a Elon Musk, a Jeff Bezos? I tell folks the types of founders we're looking for are folks like George Washington, the best founder. Folks who are hardworking, humble, service-minded, driven, passionate, great at content marketing, Common Sense by Thomas Paine, labeling it the Boston Massacre as opposed to the Boston Incident, Paul Revere's Ride, and so on and so forth. This holiday break, I did what many military historians do during their break. Spent some time visiting some battlefields. So visited the Battle of Princeton, which is one of the most consequential battles in our country's history. George Washington crossing the Delaware to serve a prize to Hessians. And then visited Valley Forge, the Boston Massacre, Bunker Hill, and also visited Gettysburg and Antietam. That trip gave me a really strong appreciation of our founding fathers and how this startup called America is always evolving and improving. We live in an incredible country, a great one, and we're living in a time of incredible change. And this is the second topic I want to quickly talk about, change. This is a well-known quote summarizing Darwin, and that is, change is the basic law of nature. But the changes wrought by the passage of time affects individuals and institutions in different ways. According to Darwin's Origin of the Species, it is not the most intellectual of the species that survives. It is not the strongest that survives, but the species that survives is the one that is able to adapt and adjust to the changing environment in which it finds itself. We live in a time of extraordinary change, AI, geopolitical, our own country, and change can be unpredictable, sometimes abrupt, and no one understands it, however, the aspect of change better than veterans. From the moment we joined the military, to the day we transitioned out, to the day that we tried to find our job, we've had to navigate incredible uncertainty. As a group, we've embraced adaptability, and through these challenges, we've gotten better. I believe the real power in change is not just being part of the change, but driving the change, and most importantly, making the world a better place. So at Stanford Business School, they like to drill and say, hey, our motto is change lives, change worlds, change organizations. I always thought that motto was kind of empty, because anyone can change the world, but can you change it for the better? And that's what I would ask everyone here in this room to do, and I believe many of you all are already doing it. Okay, last note, I really want to thank the sponsors who make this happen. JP Morgan, who has been a stalwart supporter and sponsor from our very first event. So if you meet them, please know that they truly care about your business and want to make your business better. Second Front, Cooley, PenFed, Infinite Tactics, GT Law, Citizens Bank, Holland & Knight, Caster Advisors, and Sightline Ventures. I'd like to now invite Brad, Rob, and Grant, along with Ruth, on the stage. It's my pleasure to introduce our moderator for the first panel of the day, Leveraging Leaderships to Scale Startups. Ruthann Clark serves as the market executive for aerospace, defense, and government services at JP Morgan Chase's Middle Market Banking and Specialized Industries Group. With a distinguished career in commercial banking, Ruthann is recognized for her industry expertise and leadership within the public sector. Her insights into leadership, strategy, and financial acumen make her the perfect person to lead this conversation. Please join me in welcoming Ruthann and our guests.
So I'm really honored and humbled to be among you all. I'm the daughter of a submarine captain, so my military experiences when he came home and I had to learn to say yes, sir, and no, sir, again. So really excited to be here and hosting this panel. I think the easiest way to start is, why don't we go down the line and give a quick intro, if you can, just general description, what your business does, and kind of a quick story on how you got started.
Sure. Hey, first of all, thanks, Ruth. My name's Grant Demery. I'm the CEO, co-founder at OneBrief. I've had a really good time on my startup adventure, which obviously is still in the early stages, and hope you all are too. My company, OneBrief, provides software for operational military planning. Today, it's in broad use at most of the large combatant commands, a number of service components, the U.S. Joint Staff, and then a number of smaller headquarters as well. I experienced some operational planning in the early days, first in Liberia as part of the Ebola epidemic, and then in Iraq, both with the CJTF headquarters and then later with the SOGITF headquarters, and said operational planning is a really big deal. It's the root of almost every major military decision, and we're going to go fix it. And I got out of the Army to try to do so, had many adventures that maybe we'll talk about today, and ultimately ended up here with you fine people. Thank you.
Hey, everyone. I'm Brad Genzer. First rule about being an entrepreneur is you have to mix party, like a T-shirt, with a little bit of formality, like a jacket. And you can see that I'm leading by example here. Yeah, this guy knows. This guy knows, right? Not done here. I am the CTO and one of the founders at Farther. Farther, for modern wealth builders, Farther is the private wealth company that brings together powerful technology and expert advisors to accelerate financial freedom. From a stage perspective, we are in growth stage. We raised a Series C earlier this year. We've raised about $130 million in equity financing. We have about $40 million in debt financing as well that we can access. And that's from top-tier venture partners, and things are going, decently well after 6 years, which long time journey in entrepreneurship. I was an Army officer. I was a platoon leader in OIF 5. I was a tank company XO in OIF 7. And now I'm here.
My name is Rob Huberty. I grew up in a town called Monroe, Connecticut. My middle school was called Chalk Hill, and it got renamed Sandy Hook Elementary School. I graduated high school in 1999. I went to the University of Arizona, and I went to school with a bunch of kids who were in the Columbine shooting. And so I heard those stories. I'd go to a party and listen, hey, I want to go talk to this girl across the bar, and then somebody would start telling Columbine stories from there. September 11th happened while I was in college. I graduated. Then I was an E-Dog. So I was in the SEAL teams for about 10 years. Got out, went to Wharton, worked at Amazon for about 2 years, and then the Parkland shooting happens. And we look at it, and we see that the shooters on camera with their gun out, and nobody did anything, and nobody watches the videos. So we started Zero Eyes. Zero Eyes is an AI gun detection company that processes your existing video cameras frame by frame and says, is there a gun in this image? So I started it with, I'm the CEO, one of the co-founders, did it with guys that I was all E-Dogs on the SEAL teams, the sled dogs enlisted. We have grown the company, doing it for about 7 years. We're at over 200 employees, 75% of which are veteran. We've raised about $100 million, trying to do something that we care about in a way, trying to make things work. That's it.
So different backgrounds. So we have one commercial business, one dual use, and one government defense tech company, which I think is a good mix, at different stages in their journeys. So I'm going to start with something really sort of very tactical. When you started out, who did you think your clients were going to be, and how did that change over time as you matured the business? Rob, you want to start with that one?
You want to start? Go ahead.
I didn't even hear. I can't. It's tough for me to actually hear you. I have to make eye contact.
Who was your when you started? Who were your clients, and how did that change? Who did you think your clients
were? So initially it was
change?
Schools. Right, that was our entire target, K through 12. We saw those school shootings, so we did that. But what we realized that the market is a lot bigger than that, and it's anywhere that there's an existing video camera. So the odd thing is, typically entrepreneurs have to pivot, whatever their first idea was. I don't know why we haven't really pivoted much, but what we realized is we applied the same principle to basically commercial and government and all those things. So we're on government bases, so for the same threat of somebody goes shoots up a military base, we're on cameras on military bases. We're in commercial places, we're in hospitals, and we've just realized that there's just weird things that happen with shootings that we didn't necessarily anticipate and that I've learned. So a weird one, in hospitals and emergency rooms, if you got into a fight with somebody in town and it escalated, and your side versus their side, you know, like the West Side Story, and everybody's snapping at each other and getting into a fight, and at the end of it, people need stitches, they go to the same hospital. So that fight that happened outside ends up happening in the emergency room. This is a weird thing. People pull guns in emergency rooms all the time. So it was one of those places where, like, you don't expect to have to go through metal detectors, that becomes the same product is dual use, but it was unintentional. It's not because we were smart. It's just because that same thing can be solved in one place. So I don't think that we've changed necessarily, and I think that that is unusual. We've applied the same thing to more than one place.
So when you were going through that, did you do all of that at the same time, or did you go one after another?
No, I think, you know, I've heard a lot of interesting things going through this. We did not start with any funding. We funded, I wouldn't recommend this, on our credit cards, 401ks. I'm as broke as a joke sitting on stage, so I should be more successful than I am, but I am not. It's all a front, and I'm not kidding. It's all on paper. So as you're going through it, for 2 years we didn't pay ourselves. And then you go through it, and then you beg, borrow, and steal however you get money. You're saying you get a check, and you were nice to take the check from Tim. I'll take anybody's money. And you should all, if you're raising money, take anybody's money, be like, no, I only did that because you're friends. No, I only did that because you offered money. So at the end of it, now we're at a point where we actually get real VC and real capital, but that took 5 years. Everything else was how I could beg, borrow, and steal. So as you kind of come up into those things, I'm sorry, like I'm trying to get through go back to the question?
Yeah, did you go after the clients
Right.
all at one time, or
No.
did you sort of sequentially?
So as I was trying to raise money and do that, I got a high school that would believe that our thing could work, and they let us go on nights and weekends to a high school to go carry guns around, which is crazy. I went to a water park that was off-season. All of these through connections in the SEAL teams, by the way, like all military veterans. Hey, man, who do you know would help us? So one of my friends who was a politician in New Jersey who was in the SEAL teams, I've got a school that you could go to, and so that was our first client. And as you did it, we were like, okay, 100% schools. So we were going through schools, and then this weird thing called COVID happened, and we were pretty hosed because nobody went to school. And then what happened in the midst of it, so just trying to make it through, our first real check kind of came in from that, but it was corporate clients who were getting ready, knowing that the world looked a little bit different. So we got our first mall. So a shopping mall that was closed was like, we need to be ready because the world is going to look differently post-COVID, and they were a little bit forward-leaning. And then we ended up getting in company headquarters at the same time. So bigger corporations that we wanted to be in all of their stores, instead of that, there was an insider threat of like, if you fire somebody, they're going to show up to work and make everybody pay. So all of these kind of happened in the midst of us trying to raise money, because as an entrepreneur, that's like the only thing that you could do. What is your cash? How can you pay people? How can you hire people? That's why I led with that, and I'm all going in circles. But the first client was a high school that agreed to do it for free. They became our first paying client 2 years later. We're in such a good relationship that some of the people like we want to hire from the first client. And it was all fumbling through, the world changed, and us trying to take that next opportunity so that we could get a check, so that we could continue doing what we're doing. That was kind of the path.
Yeah. Brad, how about you? When you started, have you pivoted from a client perspective?
So one, I just found out I'm not getting the $5 that I loaned you earlier back. That's a little disappointing, but I understand. I should have known. So actually, we've been quite disciplined in remaining on target for our clients. Our targets are high net worth clients, $1 to $10 million under management, and certainly like any startup, I like to like sort of say it's like the Apollo 13 scene where they're trying to keep the sort of Earth in the window. That's sort of what you're doing, and then you're trying to burn. So you always got to have that. I actually think that's a really important part about scaling and leadership. There's so many distractions when you're in a big market. There's so much business that you can do that's distracting, and you better have a darn good reason why that's on vision for you, because we're not here for the first couple of years. We're here for the next 20 years. And so we've been quite disciplined, and I literally just did an audit, and I occasionally do an audit of everything that we said through all of our financing rounds. just to show the team how remarkably consistent we have been in saying, this is where we occupy the market, this is our positioning, these are the sequence of steps that we're going to go through, and we've largely executed against that.
Great. How about you?
Yeah, we made more mistakes. So I think we're true to the initial vision, which was we want to be the way you run every modern military staff and ultimately be the future of military decisions. And initially, I wanted to sell to these large, consequential headquarters. And in the first years, I didn't go after them directly, and that was a big mistake. So in the very early years, I went after places like the war colleges, like the sources of non-dilutive capital in the military, and that was wrong. What was actually right was finding any deal, however small in dollar value, that the ideal customer would accept, which in our case was U.S. Pacific Fleet. And we got more out of a tiny government purchase card purchase that offered $15,000 of revenue, but let me embed in the Pacific Fleet headquarters, let me put a proto version of our product on a single computer that they let me into the SCIF and do a major con plan against a U.S. adversary from it, even though the revenue wasn't very big. And the reason is that the ultimate vision for our company is that we're selling to these very large and honestly somewhat difficult to sell to military headquarters, and you don't build that by selling to someone who's different from who you're ultimately selling to.
So as you all got to your first customers, and what leadership qualities did you pull from particularly your veteran experience that you think really helped at the very beginning?
I don't necessarily know that it was a leadership quality as much as you need to do the thing and it has to be as tangible as possible. And I didn't do a service academy, and I don't really care what military organization you did. Everybody goes and drives to the same location. And knowing that it is not, we didn't come up with a strategy and a hierarchy of like, we need to do these 80 things. We wanted to do one thing and do it well. And you have to have that really narrow focus. So I guess from a leadership thing is like, you're going to burn money doing that. And we were trying to build something that really required, we're more of a venture type company, and that's not good or bad, where we needed infrastructure before you can really start selling. You have to build the whole thing first to sell at once. So you have to have the vision to put the blinders on and do one thing and be the best at it. And even throughout this process, we're 7 years into it, we don't have a second product yet. And this is the first time we're really looking at what do we do, how do we build on this. So that narrow focus, particularly when the money's going away really quickly, you want to prove one thing. It's the first sale. How do you do that? Just drive at one thing.
I actually think that in the early stages, a lot of, and in particular, I think this is why we're up here, is because people think founders are important, regardless of whether or not they're not. Like the amount of debt that I underwrote from a duty perspective was a lot in the early stages. Like I was saying a lot of things to investors and to clients and to advisors whom we recruit. And they basically had to trust in me that I was going to make good on those promises. And like at the very least, I at least had a background in the military of saying, like, actually, that's what I signed up to do in the military, and I haven't failed yet to do it. And I'm actually so glad to be out of that stage of the company where I can be like, okay, like there's like real revenue and real things and real profitability on the horizon here. But that's ultimately something that you underwrite for your soldiers too. Like when you show up in combat with them, you're kind of like, well, we better trust this person. So
early stage, I don't index too heavily on leadership in the way that I would at the late stage. So early stage, I think it's helpful to think of yourself as the doer-in-chief. There's relatively few people to lead. And in fact, there's a huge advantage to having very few people. It's almost never right to be hiring early. There are exceptions. But in the early stage, we've got a lot of evidence that leadership doesn't really determine success at the early stages because there's not funds out there that are outperforming the market by looking at leadership qualities. I think that changes a great deal in the late stages. Startups are pretty notorious for burning through people, and if you can keep your regretted attrition down to almost nothing, that's a giant advantage, and I'm pretty proud of it. We've only had 2 instances of regretted attrition in 6 years, and we're at head count of 144 right now. I'll stop there, actually. Thank you.
So you're talking about building your team. So as you think about what qualities you look for as you continue to build the team, what are those qualities? And Rob, I'll start with you because I think you're the sort of the smallest team at the moment.
Missionaries, not mercenaries. That's the one phrase. So a lot of it is that I want to work with people that I know, love, and trust. That's it. So as I started, you connect the dots. What is the need that you have? Never, maybe I won't use as extreme a word. As much as you can, you don't want to hire someone, even if they're an amazing person, who's not going to do the job that you need. So you need those skill sets, particularly in a technology company. I think a lot of us are generalists. I'll at least speak for myself. I am a generalist, and I have less very technical knowledge, right? And sometimes you need to hire those technical positions. I worked at Amazon, and there were some people who were really amazingly smart, and I don't think they were in the right place, and they weren't happy, and they left. And you said, we need a statistician, right? And so early on, I needed somebody, and so it was somebody that I knew, loved, and trusted. To one degree, we joke around in the company, and we call it nepotism, because we hire friends and family. And I think that the best engineers that throughout our process are the ones that our other engineers have worked with that recommend. It's not even close. You go through a whole job process of interviewing. When someone has worked with someone else in the past, it's who you hire. But we are very strong culturally. Our whole organization is military. So we have, 200 plus people, and everybody is 75% are the military, so it is alignment. We have core values that we really, really thought about some of the lessons that we learned in the military when we basically hire for that. So missionaries, not mercenaries, nepotism, and people love, and trust.
Yeah, I mean, we are, so my organization is about 230 people. Actually, so funny, I was just benchmarking this with my chief of staff, who's a West Pointer. When he started 2 years ago, there were 16 people in my organization. There are now 93 in the organization that I control, which is kind of a wild expansion. A lot of that has come in kind of an exponential form. So you have to actually get good at communicating what you want from people. So, we have our core values at Farther, and we talk about them for real. Communication, action, respect, and excellence. And that's exactly what I expect from people at Farther, and that's what I expect from our employees coming in. I think that there's sort of I think probably the hard part about the military is that you get this hierarchical sort of idea of I'll give the orders and then do this. But really, I look for people who are going to take the action, and it's sort of like I don't want to I want to sort of direct the explosion of energy. I don't want to dictate how all the molecules go together. So we're looking for a pretty heavy action bias there.
Oh. Okay, so if you're recruiting a football team, you can get about halfway on combine scores. And I don't want to imagine that I only would focus on the stats. I just think people under-focus on it. So in one sense, you're looking for certain pretty easy to measure qualities, and then the other half is some values alignment. I'll talk about the easy to measure first. So you've got a couple of properties of a person that are quite stable over a lifetime. Think big 5 personality traits plus IQ. So high conscientiousness tends to be pretty stable over a lifetime, and there's a lot of ways in past performance to signal that. And high conscientiousness is a pretty heavy predictor of success in these later stage organizations. Same for the high openness, which is the trait that wants you to be open to ideas, to go on these crazy adventures, and the low neuroticism that makes it easy to work with a group. So if you've got someone who's truly brilliant and comes with these personality traits that are stable over a lifetime and hard to change, well, if you failed to select for those, it's kind of irreparable, because it really can't be changed. Now, the second half is the values alignment. So I think there's a lot of noise in defense tech, and it's very hard to get to the truth, which means that being a truth-seeking detective-type organization is very important, and I've tried hard to pull that out in interviews. I also try hard to pull out people's level of speed and ambition. Moving very quickly in our market is a pretty big deal, in part because we're a network effect-based product where if you grow quickly in one place, you actually help everywhere else grow quickly too. And the market's just moving very, very fast. So someone who will accomplish something in a day and exhibit a bias to action is much, much more valuable than someone who won't. The final thing I'm looking for is very domain specific. So what I'm looking for in an engineer is some specific engineering skill in the area they're expected to execute. What I'm looking for in a customer relations person is often like a deep expertise in that type of customer. And of course, there's some specialized roles where I've got some real past performance to look at. I hope that helps. Thank you.
So as you've built the team frequently, the book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There, sort of comes to mind, and I'm sure there are some people who were instrumental in the early successes of the firm that became not the right person for the next level. Can you each sort of share a story about where you had to really communicate a tough message that the person was not going to be part of the team going forward?
Yeah, this is I hate it so much being a founder. It's actually the worst part about being a founder, particularly in a high growth company, is it's exactly that. The people for one stage are not the people for the next stage. The people who are here to build out a team of 3 are not necessarily the people to build out a team of 100 or 1,000 and take us to IPO and beyond. And frankly, like, that's just sort of known. And I think that there's something like within Farther that I always tell people, I will always do my hardest to keep you here at Farther. If you're putting in the effort and good faith, then you always have a place here. It's not going to be necessarily to be in charge of everything, though. And I think that there's like a real kind of thing that goes on in society today, and we absorb the culture from society a lot, where everyone expects to be in charge just because they're in charge. And frankly, like, I have to have this conversation every year, probably 10 to 12 times. And so like a specific instances, it's just the nature of the job to say, hey, you're not right for this stage, you're always welcome here. And hopefully, like, please don't do this thing where you fail badly and start like flailing out because you feel like you should be in charge. And that's actually one of the hard parts about being a founder. You have to have these frank conversations. You have to. And you have to get people off the boat who are about to sink it.
I've obviously fired a number of people, and there's ways to set yourself up for success. So every time we hire a new executive, I make it clear that you should expect to be layered sooner or later. I hope that you don't. I hope that you grow with the company, but setting expectations very early that layering executives is common and happens as we hopefully reach the IPO stage in a couple of years. And I found that setting an expectation for that early on helps a great deal. I've also found that being very trust building in all the other areas of the company can soften the issue that, like, in order to keep a high-performing team, you must achieve talent density, and talent density means that you must fire people. So we do it a lot. My hardest one was, of course, the first one. Once you've done it a couple of times, it gets better. I actually had to let go someone who had left the military as a colonel, had come into a customer relations role and wasn't performing after some pretty direct feedback on what was going wrong. It actually turned out to be not that bad. If you deliver the message, sincerely and professionally, it turns out that the fear of doing so is a lot worse than the actual doing it. And once you get past round one, it's okay. Do try to build trust though, because if you're facing the reality of having to let people go on a fairly routine basis, you don't want that to drag down and create this culture of fear.
It's such an interesting thing. We're all talking about the same thing. I'm going to get a little bit more specific about it. It can make you literally want to throw up because someone that you brought in. So there was one real bad firing that affected me. That was somebody that I recommended, that I brought in, that I had worked before, that I knew, loved, and trusted. And what his vision for the job was different than what our company was, and it was about a stage thing. I couldn't be more thankful that he brought us to where we were, but he was not the right person to take us where we needed to go. And to understand where you stand with someone and to be very clear, I'm not necessarily a big proponent of performance managed, like yearly reviews. It's more about one-on-ones and expectation setting. You're exactly right with that. If everybody knows where they stand, it does make it easier, but it's people's livelihood and it's their job and it's their direction. And when the military doesn't teach you to fire people. And when you have to fire somebody and it's a fight, and it will be a fight, and they'll bring lawyers, it sucks. And it's somebody that you know, love, and trust, and that your relationship is fractured, fuck. You just have to do it. And then you have to hire the next one. And then maybe it's somebody that you didn't know, and maybe they presented in this way, and you used the Big Five, and you had them take the Wonderlic, and you had all this, and they went through all these things, and you thought you got one thing, and they show up with another, and they lied to you, and then they threaten. That's going to happen too. So we've seen that. Like, I've seen a little bit of all these things play out. I think we've been fortunate where it's not that frequent, but going to bed every day knowing that people rely on you for their livelihood is a burden that I don't think that we really had in the military. Man hours were free. We didn't give a fuck. That's like the thing. That's cool. That's not the truth in what you do as an entrepreneur. You have people cutting their hearts out for you. They have expectations. You need to have a pathway so that they're successful. There's another thing that's not so bad is when someone has reached their peak and your organization doesn't have the opportunity for them anymore, let them go somewhere else. Let them make the money if it's not within your company. So that's like a different one. But that one's a lot more pleasant. When you've let somebody achieve what they can achieve in their organization, and there's not a job for you because you can't burn more money, you can't pay somebody else, there's not a team for them to be in charge of, but they should be. Let their wings out and fly, and like that's okay. So someone that was an early founder that we had to let go is still nauseating to me. What does that phone call look like 6 months later? Hey, man, you okay? Because they own equity in your company. That's still part of it. There's still a relationship, and it's sour. The people who were villains, who lied about who they were, that's something. And then the people who grew out of your company. That's an element of all of it.
So for you all, as you're adjusting yourselves to the stage where you are today, who's your truth teller? Do you have one?
I like to think it's me. Like, if it's not, we probably have a problem. I mean, I do think there's some truth to that of the fact of one of the hard things one of the things that is challenging is the constant assault on sort of who you are as an entrepreneur. And really, I drive a lot of that for myself, of saying, am I the right person for this particular job, or should I go find someone else for it? Should I be handing off this? Am I being too difficult about that? So I really actually sit there and try to reflect a lot about this. But to be fair, there's a constant deluge of truth-telling for an entrepreneur. Like, I'm being told constantly in a feedback loop from clients, people who work at the company, investors, what's going on. So there's no problem with truth-telling in startups.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. You end up, particularly when you get investors who are serious and who weren't friends and family who wrote the first checks, and then you have serious people, they're going to be like, these are bad numbers, these are good numbers, you should be more concerned with that. So they have a perspective, and sometimes that differs with what the founding team thinks. And every now and again, you have to have the courage to dig in your heels against the people who wrote you a $20 million check and be like, you are wrong, and we were going to do this. You can only do that like once every couple of years. So that's, that's a fight that you have to be like all the way willing to do it. You have to feel out. You have to go to dinners and kind of figure that out. That's not just a one day at a board meeting. You're like, we're going to do this. So there's a pathway of that. I don't know that I could imagine being in an organization that doesn't have that, but particularly coming from the military, there's a lot of truth to power. I literally had a conversation on the phone right before this. We had a meeting with I'm the CEO, our CEO, the guy who reports to me, one of my first hires was like, you guys are idiots, we're not doing that, and he was harsh. And he literally had a written criticism of what we did wrong and where would we need to go and how we fund it. I did that before I walked in this room, and you just got to eat that shit. And if you're not willing to eat that shit, you're probably not shouldn't be in charge. So like that truth to power is from me, but you have to listen. You have to have open ears, and that stuff doesn't, the military sometimes quashes it, but I feel like everybody in this room has truth to power.
I get a lot out of metrics. I think you can tell that already. Okay, so there's a whole bunch of ways to figure out what's going on in the world, and like we run a pretty robust global operation now. Like it's a lot of time zones. It's in a lot of different military headquarters, and things are growing very quickly. We were late to adopt metrics. That was a mistake, and I would have done it sooner. And I think most early stage founders are not doing a good job of knowing exactly how much usage they have and caring about how fast is your usage growing, how fast is your revenue growing, or how fast is some appropriate top-line metric growing. And if you're enterprise software, your top-line metric is definitely ARR, and your number 2 metric is some measure of user engagement, the exact version of which is kind of up to you. Obviously, there's some deep tech companies that have a different metric. The reason I get a lot out of those is that the number of distractions available to us about what other people in the market are doing, what's coming in the news, what's primarily just other people's marketing, signals that are coming from customers that aren't even a problem I really want to jump on, because it's actually pretty hard to distinguish initially between something that's a true emergency and something that is actually okay. Metrics help me understand what the truth is. So I think you should use them. Thank you.
So, Rob, you talked about a lot of veterans in the firm and then bringing in some non-veterans. How do you integrate that into the culture of the organization? Is it different? Is it something you're conscious about?
I think that we're really conscious. So I think some of the things that, even though we're a highly veteran organization, I don't think that we do very much that's like the military, other than the camaraderie and the missing that bigger mission than ourselves. So the hierarchy, we're a tremendously flat organization. People should be able to walk into your office. I found in the military when someone said they had an open door policy, that was like that was a trick. They didn't actually. The whole chain of command was going to do that. So you have to be real about that, right? So our core values, like we start with no jerks. Like it's on our website. It's written on anything. We don't play that military game of rank. I don't care what, we have a lot of jokes about different services or whatever. It's fine. But like we are absolutely, we started in the Navy, but we have every kind of special operations. We have the highest to the lowest in the company of what that looked like, and I don't really care whether you were enlisted sailor on a ship or that you were a colonel somewhere else. Like it doesn't really matter. So as much as we can, I know it's intimidating for engineers to come in and see that organization, and they have an expectation that we, our peas don't invade our carrots or whatever it is that the preconceived notions of the military is, but. The follow the rules or whatever, you can never dissent. Yes, sir, no, we don't play that game at all. But we have to be really cognizant of it because people from the outside coming into our organization, we have to be welcoming. We have to be inviting. We can't be, for the lack of a better term, militant to them. And I think a lot, because our background is what it is, that we had a disdain for that anyway. I love the military, but I don't like the military. And so as we bring people in, that's something that we're absolutely cognizant of, and we have to kind of break all of their preconceived notions of what that is.
Brad, because you do commercial work, are you similar or different?
Yeah, we have not almost no military people. I think like 4 of us out of a company of hundreds, and so it's very different. And I think that I don't think it's very different at all. I actually find that most people, there's a big theme that we talk about with advisors. So we recruit advisors, and they're really the growth engines. And when you free up their time, they become something that is the best version of themselves. When you get them pointed towards their clients, when you're sort of taking stuff off their plate. The same thing is true of a lot of employees today. I would say the big error that I see across employers that are not military or even in the military is the fact that you have these incredibly trained, highly motivated people, and you just squash all the life out of them. And when you sort of take that away from them, I think it's, and say like, hey, you're in charge, like you really own this. First, they're shocked, and they usually sit there and don't communicate as much as they should. So you're like, would you like me to set up meetings, or can you just say out loud what you're doing right now? And because we can do it either way to get you started. And what I find is that over time, they really, I think that people really take to that. And people, I don't know, how many of you here want to be told exactly what to do? No one? No one here. Some of you do. I actually know some of you do. But the reality is that most of you are here to be motivated, to be connected to a big mission, to be and to put your skills to the test, really. And that's true of everyone, civilian or military, who are motivated in the world.
So I do want to go to fundraising because obviously that's a big topic for a lot of people. Can you all sort of give your best advice to early people who are just entering this in terms of fundraising?
Yeah, only the market will tell you if you can raise. So there's, no matter how much advice you've received on you can or cannot raise for idea X, it might be true, and the only way to find out is through the market. We got fairly negative fundraising feedback early on. And in part, that's because I was just a bad fundraiser. And in part, that's because we were very early to defense tech. So one of the hardest experiences of my adventure here was raising that first pre-seed round. The other fundraisers were almost handed to us on a silver platter, and that one was terrible. Like, could barely sleep. The one consolation was I thought it was really cool. It was like, haha, I get to go do this. But it was very, very difficult. And the one thing that helped is we were brutally determined to do it because we had to. We were going to be out of money if we did not, despite the fact that the signals we were getting were, I don't know if you can do this. The second piece on early fundraising is just like the tactical advice of how much outreach you need to do. The correct volume of meetings per week is 15. So if you're doing a pre-seed round, that's probably a mix of angels, super angels, and like micro VCs, and you're looking for check sizes between like the 10K, seriously be very proud of your 10K check, all the way up to the couple 100,000. At that stage, you're raising a small amount from a large number of people. You're trying to get the snowball to snowball, which means that getting someone to write you a very small check is super valuable as signal and as future introductions. And the only way to get good when you're of course going to suck at fundraising because it's your first time is to get lots and lots of reps and lots of feedback from the market. And I think almost everybody makes the mistake of doing insufficient meetings. I think 15 is about right because you need something to calibrate on. How are you going to know if you're doing enough? I recommend that one. Where if you're above that, you're probably not preparing adequately. You may be unable to truly give your full effort to every pitch, which is another piece of early fundraising. Like every pitch gets your full effort, no matter how bad it's going. But if you're doing enough volume, your odds of success are much, much, much better. Over.
Yeah, and so with fundraising, and I'm thinking about where I was with where you are and what was surprising to me. First, there's a lot of structure in the market, way more structure than people give it credit for. And I think that's really important to understand that structure, different requirements for different phases. And when you start a company, the sort of path goes, you have nothing, maybe a PowerPoint and a dream. People are just investing in the founders. Then it's like, can you do anything? Can you launch a product? Can you get in the market? Can you get product market fit? Like where I am right now is past product market fit. We're launching for our initial market, we're launching new markets and continuing to scale up that kind of exercise. Those are different things. And different funds, different funding vehicles have different requirements. So when you go to a fund, and a mistake that a lot of entrepreneurs make is when you go to a fund who can only write a $20 million check and you're asking them for a seed stage check, like that's not a thing they can do. So they might take the meeting just because someone introduced you or something like that. Just know who your market is. That's number one. And number two is I feel like a lot of people, and I have this conversation a lot with entrepreneurs, with people who are coming to join our company, people think investors are like somehow evil. They're actually like part of the team, and they're really super high value add to us in navigating this, and they are those truth tellers. So like, I think people lean away from fundraising too much, and I think you should lean into it more. You get really great partners, you de-risk your capital base, you get money to invest. Just make sure you're hitting your metrics at each stage and understand what those are.
These guys are very eloquent, and I'm not. I'm a knuckle dragger. I'm basically an idiot, but I raise money anyway. And it's all the same thing. I've been in the same meeting, and I have a lot of the same opinions as you guys, but I'll state it differently. You get told no every single day. So he said 15 meetings in a week. What he's really telling you is that you're going to get 15 no's in a week in order to get yes. Like, that number adds up. So I want to say that early on, like, I stopped tracking at 400 no's, and they're all light no's. They're polite no's. The mentors, go talk to somebody who's raised money before and who doesn't cavalierly say, I almost want you to put like the, don't listen to the word that I got money on a silver platter. That only exists because he didn't for so long. We talked about this earlier. It's like, I almost don't want to talk about where I am now, because if you're an early stage, it's a fight. So you have to figure out how to sell. You have to get, they're not the enemy. A lot of times they just don't know how to say yes, so you have to convince them how to say yes. So you have to learn to say yes and present the information in a way that they can digest it. And that's typical through pitch decks. That's through all the MBA stuff helps a lot in that. You have to learn who to listen to and who not to listen to, because 400 different pieces of advice in 400 different directions that we all know is not very helpful, and you have to figure out who to listen to and not listen to. You have to pitch your fucking ass off. You have to be good at it. You have to go, eyes wide open. You have to understand what their motivations are. You have to research them. You should never go into a meeting where you haven't Googled the person you're with in anything in the rest of your life. If you go sit down with somebody, you should know who they are, and you should know what their motivation is. And that check size, when you realize that, like, I'm asking for $3 million and the lowest check they write is 20, you are a moron. Like, you just lost your opportunity, and it's just one of those things. And you frame it the way that they want, and you just wasted something that should have been later down the road. The best thing that you can do is mentors who have done it before, and to know that you're going to get told no every single day. And there's one thing that I will disagree with what the market does. There's an element of that you're right, but you have to know what you think your value is, and you have to play chicken with them a little bit. And if you're not willing to do that, and particularly when you start getting some yeses or some interest, sometimes you'll play people against each other, but if you don't like the deal and they're not the right team, you should say no, and that's really hard when you really need the money. So you should be demanding in value, particularly as you get later on. Early on, it's very hard to be, I want $10 million, we're worth 50, and because you're just not, it's a joke. You're not worth that, right? And you think that you do, and you just pulled out some number. There has to be logic behind it. But as you progress at some given point, you're like, this is the valuation we're looking for, and we're not budging. And that's hard.
Tim's about to tackle us.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, cool. My name is John Davis. I'm an Army retiree here from Sherman, Texas. And so far in the first 2 hours, I'm finding I'm way out of my element. But I'm a founder, and I'm very interested. All of you either spoke directly or alluded to the element of trust in your organization. So from a leadership perspective, if you look at the two ends of the scale, I put trust in everyone until they break it, or you're going to have to come in and earn my trust. Where's your experience been in terms of, the business aspect of that?
Full trust until otherwise told. And the reality is, people end up somewhere farther down the path than full trust. I mean, some people end up with it, but you got to learn that. I mean. And the reality is that if you let people blow up a little bit, they learn a ton.
Within reason, we had an actual spy, at which I'm actually still really proud that we.
That's different.
We're a defense company, but to answer your question, almost full trust until someone's broken it.
Let your heart be broken.
Yeah. Thank you.
That's so sweet. It's true. Yeah.
Hi, John Chan. I'm with a company called One Range. I appreciate all your perspectives. I think most founders would love to be in the position that you guys are in today. You talked a lot about talent density, about knowing, loving, and trusting your folks, about giving them the tools to give them the time and freedom. So I just would love to understand how you think about development of your employees, either from an upskilling perspective or retention, how you invest in your team.
Got to be very narrow about that.
Please.
So most development doesn't work, and a small amount works really, really well. So I mean, at our scale right now, like the people I most directly influence are executives, and if an executive requires large amounts of development, you need to fire them. There's not time to do this, and it's usually indicative of a much larger problem. There are certain things that you can develop someone in. So a good example is, say you've got someone who's very skilled at managing, broad operations, and you want to improve their understanding of our approach to technology. You can get there. You want to give someone a very specific skill around finance in order to make their role more expansive because you believe they're going to get there very quickly, especially for someone who's quick on the uptake. Like, you can totally do that. If you've got someone who, for instance, lacks product sense, I don't think that's teachable, which means, especially in product roles, don't even try. Let people grow up into those roles. That sounds a little bit harsh. I actually do spend a lot of time giving serious feedback. We do annual reviews. We do them formally. We do it because I think it's some level of honesty, or basically I think it forces this very deliberate feedback session. I probably take an hour to write it for each executive, and I certainly provide that, and then in one-on-ones, things that I hope are genuinely helpful to people's development, but I'm trying to win around the margins on things where the gaining of a skill or the changing of a very specific behavior would yield better performance, and I don't think I can upskill someone too dramatically over.
A lot of the development, this idea of military development, where you're taking someone and doing something. By the time you've advanced, we're advancing in skill so quickly that you can't develop someone quickly enough to actually kind of up-level them. What you can up-level them on, and everyone on, is the mission that you're going to achieve. And what we try to do is make sure that we're very transparent in how we communicate as executives with our team. We show every deck, every board meeting, this is how we're doing, this is what we're doing, and allow people to sort of self-orient. Because the reality is, what you said, if an executive can't handle their own development, if they can't handle their self-learning and orientation to what they need to do, that's a problem. It's a huge problem.
We have just different levels of skills. So I really like taking junior military people, like the E3, who I think probably got out of the military early, and I have a pipeline for that, and we've promoted 25 of them and kind of changed their lives. I'm very proud of that. The executives are a lot harder. The one thing that I will say, just that's any different, if you don't have a path forward for your people, they're going to leave. And you just have to understand, sometimes that's good, and they have to grow somewhere else. But if you don't have a path for them to be happy, you're going to lose them.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for the presentation. Really enjoyed it. I'm a JPMC alum. I was there till 2023 last year. Left to found UPivotal, Air Force Academy grad, JD, MPA, Cornell, and Harvard. You mentioned the 14 or 15 no's a week, 400 potentially. I'm based out of Dallas, drive a lot to Austin. We've attained product market fit, pre-seed round, emptied the 401k and all that kind of stuff, savings to fund everything, friends and family. I'm just as broke as Rob. But so we're in this pre-seed round. I want to get to the 15 no's. This morning I was with a client, Alabama A&M, meeting with global collaboration with a university in Africa, with their students, That's getting to those clients, no problem. Getting to the pre-seed investors to actually do the pitch and have those conversations, that's where I'm trying to get to. So I wanted you to speak a little bit about how to get there. Flew in very early last night from Dallas to San Francisco. We'll head back, early flight again on Friday. But getting to those places to have those no's, no problem. How do you get to those? Can you please speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, so it sounds like a top of funnel problem. So I imagine an insufficient number of angel investors or micro VCs are entering your top of funnel. And there's really only two ways to get an investor into your funnel, and that is cold outreach or a warm intro. People underestimate cold outreach. Like, it totally works. If you spend a couple hours crafting the perfect standard cold intro that lays out what your company does, if you truly have product market fit at the pre-seed stage, like, you should be in the very good category. So you lay out what you do, you lay out the top 3 points why you're interesting as an investment. It's kind of all you need, and ask for the conversation. There's a very limited supply of good companies to invest in. You'll get meetings that way. So send that out targeted to honestly, probably a lot. I'm not sure the exact number of outbound you're going to need to do right now, but if you're not sending something like 50 emails a day, you're probably wrong. So do a huge amount of cold outreach. LinkedIn is your friend. There's lots of email scraping tools. So go to someone's profile on LinkedIn, look at people who have invested in companies like yours, do a lot of outreach. Simultaneously, in addition to the cold email, don't hold up sending your cold email to wait for a warm intro. I think people get stuck there and end up with insufficient outreach. In addition to the cold, start working the warm intro by going to your founder friends, and once you have your first investor, going to your existing investors and getting them to intro you to more. I hope that helps.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would say the one thing, he said that investors aren't the enemies, right? And what you realize is it is their job to find great companies. So that cold outreach is the reason that they'll answer most of the time, because they're looking for companies all the way. If someone emails them, they're like, oh, this company's nothing. They don't look at it that way. That is an opportunity for them to learn. So it's actually a benefit. That's why they'll do cold outreaches all the time. They are educated in the market by listening to pitches almost exclusively, is what you find out. That they don't even research on their own. They just listen to people pitch all day long, and they only can say yes, 10 times a year, 5 times a year, once a year, whatever their portfolio is. So they will answer those emails. And then in an environment like this, people who've raised money, that's the easiest way to do.
And just this, it is a product market fit exercise to raise too. And so what do you think about the probabilities here? There's a number times probability to succeed. There is the expected value of this company. Communicate your TAM. Your total addressable market, it better be large for a seed stage company. Communicate your economics around that, what's your eventual gross margin profile, for example. Communicate your CAC to LTV. How are you going to acquire customers? And really, CAC to LTV is sort of a much bigger one, because a lot of companies can just burn through cash acquiring clients, but those are what they care about. Put that in the subject line too.
All right. Thank you.
You need an MBA to understand you. The CAC to LTV. Yeah. I hope everybody knows that.
Client acquisition cost or customer acquisition cost and lifetime value. So you don't want to pay $1 million to get $100 of lifetime value, which has been, by the way, this is a real thing. We're living through sort of a shakeout from a lot of interest rate changes that where there was when interest rates change around, your values proposition can change around too. And we're going through a shakeout through that. So it's pretty important to recognize that there's still a lot of hangover and a lot of bad kind of businesses that were built that people are eating right now because interest rates are higher.
I was told by Tim I'm the last question, so I'll make it quick. I'm interested in the operational side of product market fit. So what did doing things that don't scale look like for you guys before you reached that product market fit?
I got some cool ones. Okay, so doing things that don't scale is basically about do whatever it takes to get real usage by your target user as early as you possibly can. I obviously experienced a lot of barriers to entry just because like just bringing software to like giant military headquarters, inherently has a lot of barriers. I didn't even know what they were initially, meaning like the barriers that actually matter are basically authority to operate, to get your software on their networks, and figuring out defense contracting. But in the days before having that, the two strategies that worked really well. First one was we started this like exercise series. We would cold LinkedIn recruit a bunch of military planners, usually majors through colonels, and say, come to my all-day Saturday exercise, we'll pay you, and we'll do a simulated crisis scenario, usually at like the Joint Task Force level. And we'd put like shit tons of effort into those. Like we tried to make it almost like a separate product market fit just on exercises so that people would want to keep coming and come to more exercises. And we'd have one group, one operational planning team use Word and PowerPoint and old tools, and one operational planning team use a shitty proto version of OneBrief. Ended up doing that 19 times. And it was a really good exercise to get to product market fit because we could get operational-like usage in the days before we had access to these military commands. I'll skip my other example for the sake of time. Over to Brad.
Yeah, I think it's really important to point out, why do you do things that don't scale? It's because you don't actually know if there's a deal to be had until you actually have been running it and it starts to hit as something. So like, in a way, almost everything that we have started ever has been like, let's see, yeah, let's do that, let's do that, let's see if we can do that, let's see if we can do that. And I think that there's a careful line you have to walk, and this is, in the military, we are used to gray areas. There's a careful line you have to walk about over-promising and under-delivering. Usually when you do this, I'm very straightforward about, we don't do that today, but we'll figure it out if there's something here to do. And so, one, founder-led sales don't scale, and I do that every single day, all across our businesses. Two is the operations behind it. You have to, in the contracts that you sign, like those things may or may not scale, but you got to figure out if there's a deal to be had there. Like, so everything is the answer. Right.
So basically, you need to start with a square and then turn it into a ball because you've roughed all the edges up, because everything was manual until it became obvious, like, God, this sucks to do this way. How can I not do it this way? But you need that whole product market fit. If you get 50 people to show up at an event 19 times, that's bananas. Like, they showed up. The time that you know that you've got something going on when people actually show up. So as you're doing it, to sell anything, to get somebody to pay $1 for something is an easy way. Do it all without, if you scale something that you haven't built first, you'll just throw it away every single time. So do something with so many repetitions, you're like, God, I have to do it easier, and then figure out how to solve it easier. Thank you.
Great. I want to thank Ruthann, Grant, Brad, Rob for taking the time. These folks are super busy. They've all raised over $100 million, revenue probably approaching $100 million. The fact that they're taking the time to chat with us, share their lessons is really awesome. So thank you all so very much. Let's give them a round of applause.